Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week the first question comes from Lemme Palmer, who asks, why no intro music? Well, I did the intro music for like the first 200 episodes of the series, and I decided to do something different. I've seen the light as far as intro music. Why do you want to waste all that time with a theme song and an opening title sequence? I mean, let's just get right to it. Let's do a snappy cold open followed by a title card like this. See, isn't that much better? I think that's much better. Next question from Ahoyerno, who says, do you think YouTube can be a family-oriented website in its current state? Currently, the content ranges from the worst neo-Nazi shit to children's cartoons and educational shows. I feel like Google has to make a choice. Either YouTube will be a megaphone for hate speech, or it will be a website with family-oriented content. You can't be both, and yet blocking YouTube entirely doesn't feel right. Your thoughts? I think I agree with you in spirit, but I do think you're establishing a little bit of a false dichotomy there. I think you can screen out hate speech without requiring that the content on the site all be completely family friendly. There's a lot of things that would not be appropriate for children, according to the tastes of most parents, that would not qualify as hate speech. I don't think YouTube needs to make everything G-rated, but I definitely would love to see it take a much, much harder, more aggressive stand against hate speech and bullying and abuse and harassment, all of these things that it claims to want to do away with, that it has revised its policies and its community guidelines in the last several months to make it more explicitly against the rules. But you know, you still see channels that are all about inciting harassment against other YouTubers, that are all about just stoking abuse and sowing discord and in some cases just spewing hate speech, just saying just outright just racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, religiously bigoted things about people or groups. And I think you can crack down on that and get rid of that. Just say that's not going to be on this platform anymore. Close down those channels without making it so that everything has to be suitable for kids. Troubleshooter 125. I was intrigued to hear that you studied Latin for a bit, I presume in high school or college. I took it my sophomore year in high school, got A's in it, got tired of memorizing conjugations and declensions and quit, but it gave me a wonderful window into where our language comes from, and indeed some of the German I speak as well. To this day, I think that added understanding has enriched my own grasp of English. I was wondering if it did the same for you, and if so, what your thoughts were about your brief contact with what I still think of as a not-so-dead language. Oh yes, I would say my studies of Latin definitely gave me a expanded perspective, a deeper understanding of English and of language in general. And you know, the cool thing about studying a language like Latin, which is classified as a dead language, it's not widely spoken anywhere anymore, is that you not only get a language class, but you also get a history class, and a little bit of a literature class as well, because many of the Latin readings that we were assigned in my Latin classes, and it was in high school, by the way, were things like the writings of Julius Caesar or Ovid, you know, these sort of giants of ancient classical literature. So you get a lot of different lines of instruction, not just learning the language, but learning about the culture and learning about the writing and the literature of the time. So it was a really, really wonderful class. And even though I have little recall of how to actually speak Latin, I retain enough of it that, like, if a word has a Latin root, I can usually work out what it means, or I can at least recognize that it's a Latin root even if I don't know what it means. That's why I really strongly believe that we should be teaching children multiple languages at much earlier ages. When you learn things like that as a child, it's like your brain is just a sponge. It's like your brain is not yet closed, you know, and it's much easier for you to pick things up. It's fascinating to see children learning to speak second languages. They can just pick it up so quickly. And I really think we should start doing that. I think starting very, very early, like in elementary school, we should be teaching children how to speak other languages. If English is their first language, we should be giving them the ability to learn Spanish or French or maybe even Latin, or some other language that they will find useful later on in their life so they can grow up not being monoglots like me and not having to struggle with it, but being multilingual. I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing, because when you introduce it at the high school level, at least for me, and I know for a lot of other people, it's far more challenging to learn it at that point than it would be if you had learned it much, much younger. This one's from Inertia, who says, Steve, two things. Sunday is my birthday. I guess it is the previous Sunday. By the time the video is aired, it would have passed. Can I get a 30th shout out? It's a big year. But my main question this week is in regards to how police shootings of unarmed black people in the television, well, particularly cop shows. During the progress of investigating the shooting, even though they appear to be innocent, lo and behold, they uncover evidence and motive for the act that instigated the shooting. My problem is that it is a dangerous trope, that the police never really make mistakes in shootings. I think in light of what is happening with the shooting of unarmed people, this repeated message is a dangerous message to be pushing. What do you think? Well, first and foremost, happy birthday, happy 30th. It is a big year. Happy 3 decades on this planet. Yeah, I think you're right. And it is a trope. And I think that is a problem, especially in cop shows and especially within the context of the problems that we have in our culture today with police brutality, with the racial element of police brutality, where black folks are far more likely to be victims of police brutality than white folks. I think that it is a problem that so many of that virtually all of the portrayals of police in popular culture start with the assumption that the cops are all good, heroic, well-meaning people, and that their various foibles and shortcomings, you know, that's just sort of added in for dramatic flavor, but it doesn't really affect their ability to do their jobs. The occasional acknowledgments of wide systemic problems in shows like that are just sort of treated as things that, oh, the good cops know all about it, and they're really embarrassed about it, and they're really ashamed, and oh, I wish that we would do something about these bad cops, but it's not really our problem. And I don't know, I don't think that helps. Next up from Vitamin W. I'm a male who has gotten out of a physically abusive relationship with a female. I left my house in the middle of the night about a year ago. I've since gotten into a much better relationship in the time since, and most of the time I am much happier. I refuse to crawl into the toxic sludge pit that is MRA land. Is there a good way to bring attention to my situation and getting awareness to this issue without echoing the vitriol spouted by the MRM? Well, one of the best things you can do is what you just did in a small way, which is to share your story. You are someone who has experienced this and been fortunate enough to get out of it, to escape an abusive situation, and now you're doing much better, which I'm very glad to hear. And I think that's a story that needs to be told, both so that people who are in a situation similar to yours can have some hope and can have some idea of how they can get themselves out, and also to make sure that stories like yours are a part of the conversation. We've done a much better job in the last few decades of being there and providing resources for women who are in abusive situations and need to get out. We still don't do enough. We still don't do anywhere near enough. It's not adequate yet, but we're doing much better. And we need to do much better for men who are in those situations too, because men, as you know from personal experience, can find themselves in abusive situations, can experience physical abuse and emotional abuse and financial abuse, and need to sometimes seek out some help in order to get themselves out. And that help very often is not there. And it should be there. And I think stories like yours need to be shared in order for people to realize, hey, we need to be there for everybody who needs to get out of an abusive relationship, whether it's a man or a woman, whether they're in a relationship with a man or a woman. If someone is trapped in an abusive relationship, they should have a way out. They should have someone that they can reach out to for a hand and say, get me out of here. So I think telling your story is very important. And framing it in such a way that, you know, as you said, you don't want to dive into the sludge pit of the MRA world. You don't frame it in a way that, oh, it's all the fault of women. It's all the fault of feminism. Men are just being victimized and are being treated as disposable and all these things. I don't think that reality bears out any of those beliefs. But nonetheless, people who are in abusive relationships should have an outlet, should have a way out. There are organizations, there are a few, not many, but there are a few organizations that focus on the issues relating to vulnerable men, to men in abusive situations. Calm, the campaign against living miserably, is pretty good. The Good Men Project is pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good. And I'm sure there are other resources or organizations you could find if you looked into it. But yeah, I mean, there just need to be more resources. There need to be more opportunities for people in situations like the one you were in to get help. And I think that's a story that needs to be told. And maybe as someone who has survived that, you can help to tell that story. Natalie Kirk. Hey, Steve. Although I lament for the current state of much of the internet, there are some good things that have come from the internet of today. Being able to keep in touch with people you would otherwise never would have is one. Another I found in recent years is the Facebook groups where people come together to find lost pets and their owners. Although it's sad to see when some pets have been hit by cars, it's outweighed when I see cats and dogs that were lost being selflessly taken care of and reunited with their rightful owners. It gives me warm fuzzies, and I now feel a duty when I see a loose dog or a cat that appears homeless. My question for you is, what warm fuzzy things have you found that the internet has fostered? Oh, I guess a lot of animal-related stuff. I'm sort of a sucker for animals as well. I mean, everybody knows I have a cat. When I was younger, I had a dog that I just loved very much, and animal-related stuff just really does it for me. I'm fortunate enough to have many, many friends on Facebook who are animal lovers as well, who have pets or who are just kind-hearted, compassionate people towards animals. So we see my friends post about their animals, post about their dogs or their cats, and it definitely helps to cheer you up. Like if you're having a bad day, whether you're having a bad day because of something internet related or not, being able to, log onto Facebook and scroll through your timeline and see your friends posting pictures of their cats, or videos of cute animals. So, things like that absolutely give me a boost and cheer me up. And it's wonderful to have, as shitty as the internet can be sometimes, and as easy as it can make it for fucking awful negative people to get at you, it also makes it easy to find these wonderful cheering things from your friends or from people who share something in common with you. And it's really nice. It's really a wonderful thing to have. Carlisle the Cinephile. Hey there, Steve. As if my username wasn't a dead giveaway, I am a humongous movie fan, and for a very long time I've wanted to create a video series where I review movies and discuss aspects of popular culture, particularly nerd culture, that I find annoying or problematic. My question to you is this: what kind of equipment would you recommend to a YouTuber who is just starting out and has a limited budget? Well, if you are planning to appear on camera for your videos, then there are three basic things that you need, and that is, of course, a camera, a microphone, and lighting. And if you are choosing to remain off camera, if you're just going to narrate over images or something, then you can take off lighting and camera and just get a good microphone. And for a good microphone, I would recommend, you can get a relatively inexpensive USB microphone, like a Blue Snowball. Does a good job for the price. It's not like professional level, but it's decent. It's much better than like the built-in microphone on a webcam or something like that. So I would recommend something like that. As far as being on camera, for a basic starter kit, something like a Logitech webcam is pretty good for the price. Again, it's relatively inexpensive, and with proper lighting, it can look pretty good. Or if you have a camera on your phone, the newer smartphones have cameras that are, in many cases, better than the camera I'm using to shoot this video right now, because this camera I'm using is several years old, and the new high-def cameras on like a current generation smartphone are phenomenal. I mean, you get just an incredible picture from one of those, and if you can combine that with an external microphone so you can get good sound and some good lighting to make sure that everything is nice and crisp and well lit, you can make a damn fine video with that. So you can make really high quality technical content without having to invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in equipment. Now, if you happened to have thousands of dollars to invest in equipment, of course you could get a much better result. But a decent phone in your camera and some good lights, 2 or 3 point lighting, 2 in front and 1 behind, and a good microphone, you can do a lot with just something like that. Marv Roberts, atheists have stood against Christianity for years, and that is okay, but the moment they go against Islam, they are considered bigots and racists? I don't understand. Why shouldn't we speak up against Islam? What makes Islam any less of a target than Christianity? There are a few very crucial things to consider. First is the fact that when Westerners talk about Islam, we are talking almost exclusively to other Westerners. We are talking to each other about Islam. And by going on and on about how awful Islam is in a Western context, all you're really doing is serving to further marginalize Muslims in this part of the world that are already marginalized. And you're not doing any good for the Muslims that are hurting in the Muslim world, because you're not talking to people in that part of the world for the most part. You're talking to people in this part of the world. Now, if you genuinely care about the plight of Muslims in places like Iran or Saudi Arabia, where the governments are very authoritarian and oppressive and theocratic, I think the best thing to do is to find the voices from within those cultures and turn up the volume on them, amplify them, point people in their direction, and vote for politicians who you think might be amenable to changing U.S. policy toward those countries, who might emphasize the need for human rights and women's equality and religious pluralism and, just, fair, humane treatment of LGBTQ folk. Vote for people in your various elections who you think will support these measures. Because unfortunately, there's only so much we can do to help people in those situations. There are things we can do, and I think we should be doing those things. But I don't think railing about how awful Islam is to a mostly Western audience from a place of general ignorance and misunderstanding is going to help anybody. All that's going to do is result in a lot more negative feelings toward Muslims in this part of the world, and we don't need any more of that. Danae Dennison, remember, it's Danae, like Chardonnay. Evolution gave me no choice in standing out. I have albinism, and my mom didn't help by giving me a weird name. I've come to love my name and white hair and the gifts they've given me. As a cis white male, have you seriously examined what led you to your awareness and compassion? Were you hassled or bullied before YouTube? How did you deal with it? It's okay if you were ever the bully. Sometimes people make mistakes. I will forgive you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I remember particular episodes throughout my childhood and adolescence where I was the bully in a particular situation, but overall I was not a bully. I'm somewhat relieved to be able to say. I mean, there were a few times where, and it was usually the result of peer pressure. There were a bunch of us around and we were sort of picking on one particular person who we had decided was lower than us in the social pecking order in junior high. And I remember there was this one time when someone had like a sheet of paper for like homework or something that I tore up just maliciously, just, no excuse for it. I was just being a dick. But for the most part, I wasn't like that. And I wasn't really bullied that much either. I remember there was a bully who tormented me for a couple of weeks when I was in fifth grade, I think, fourth or fifth grade. But it didn't last very long. So I don't have a lot of personal experience either as a bully or as someone who was actually bullied. But I know that the one thing that helps the most when you are someone who is being bullied is to know that there are people there who will stand up for you, who will stand with you, who will say, hey, I'm on your side. Don't worry, you're not going through this alone. I remember when I was being bullied, one of my friends came up to me and said, hey, we heard what so-and-so did to you. Because there was a bully who would like follow me home from school and threaten me and say he was going to beat me up or whatever. And I remember one of my friends came up to me before school while this was happening, and he said, hey, I just want you to know that we're not going to let anything happen to you because he doesn't mess with our friends. And there's such just a rush of just gratitude and relief, and knowing that you have people who are on your side, who will stand up for you and who will make sure that you're okay, who care about you. I think that's really important. So that's what I try to do. Whatever I am, however slight and insignificant, I want to be facing in that direction. I want to be using it for something positive and standing on the side of people who need to have other people on their side, who need someone to stand up for them. I don't know. It's just something that's always been very important to me.
You're out!
I guess maybe finding more sensical sound effects to cue the next segment would be important to me too, but apparently it's not, because I'm just throwing up any old rubbish. Anyway, that sound means that it's the end of this main segment, and it's time for the back part of the video, which is a little something I like to call
the lightning round.
Matthew Tassel, I think Batman is just garbage and Superman is boring, but do you think the Hulk would win in a fight with them? Well, even though you insulted my two favorite characters, Matthew, I guess I'll answer your question. Yeah, if we pretend that they're real people, then yeah, I think the Hulk would beat the shit out of both Superman and Batman. I don't think it would be much of a fight. Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. Yo, Steve, do you ever watch Beavis and Butthead? If so, what was your favorite episode of the show? For example, my favorite episode from the show was the part where Beavis and Butthead kept on laughing for the rest of the episode and couldn't stop. I remember the episode where they made photocopies of money, including coins. Like they made photocopies of coins and then just tore them out and tried to spend it on stuff. I thought that was really funny. Kevin Logan, what are your thoughts on the Ryan Lochte fake theft thing? I mean, Ryan Lochte always kind of struck me as a bit of a dipshit, you know? Like he's just sort of walking around in a fog. So I mean, in a way, I guess it doesn't surprise me, but it's just so weird. Like, it's just one of those stories where you read about it and you're like, what? Like, why would anybody even do that? Why would you lie about having been, why would you even make up that story? Patrick Dodds, Steve, I hope you'll answer this question. It's about the late comedian actor John Candy. What's your opinion on him and his work in general? Good, bad, or indifferent? Are there any movies of his you like? I'm not sure why, I'm just really curious. Generally, I would categorize him as indifferent. Like, he's never someone who was one of my favorites, but he's never someone that I had any particular dislike for either. As for favorite movies, I mean, he was in Stripes. Stripes is pretty funny. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, he had a starring role in with Steve Martin. That's probably, I guess, it would be my favorite if I had to pick a favorite John Candy movie. I thought he was really funny in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Girl in a Hat. Steve, there seemed to be a resurgence of anti-vax people on Facebook who keep spreading lies about vaccination. Why do people think that a meme is an expert on preventable diseases? I think that is confirmation bias. I think memes are a lot easier and a lot quicker than having a full nuanced understanding of an issue. And I think, you know, anti-vax stuff is just like a lot of other conspiracy theories where people believe them because they go against the conventional wisdom and that makes them feel smarter. They feel like they're more informed than other people. I think that's a lot of it. And it's unfortunate because anti-vax is an incredibly dangerous viewpoint and can actually lead to people, you know, dying. It's really too bad. Tom McDonald, Steve, I saw your complete collection of the 1950s George Reeves Superman TV shows on your shelf. I had to stop the video and look for full episodes free on the internet or on one of the streaming services I subscribe to. Turns out none of them are in the public domain or available otherwise than by buying the sets you have, or maybe by going to skeevy torrent sites, which is beneath me by a hair's breadth. So I had to scratch my Superman itch by buying the first season on DVD through Amazon. I can't really afford such luxuries at this time of the month. My question, do you feel guilty for forcing me to buy this? And if not, how can you call yourself a decent human being? Why should I feel guilty for encouraging you to go buy the first season of The Adventures of Superman and getting not only the awesome George Reeves and the terrific Jack Larson as Jimmy Olsen, but also Phyllis Coates as Lois Lane, who to me will always be the greatest live-action Lois Lane ever. I will not apologize to you, Tom. I will say, you're welcome. And I'm sorry that you couldn't afford it. I hope it doesn't screw up your budget too much. Umar Sories, okay, Steve, comic geek question. You talked about Batman Grendel, and yes, awesome stuff. Have you read the Grendels? If you did, who's your favorite? Hunter Rose, Christina Spar, Brian Lee Sung, Epi, or Warchild? Mine is Hunter Rose, of course. Oh, and by the way, if you have a chance, pick up the Shadow versus Grendel. It kind of rocked. Actually, I have read very little of the actual Grendel series. I remember when I read the first Batman Grendel crossover back when it first came out once upon a time when I was a lot more into comics than I am now. I think I went to my local comic shop and picked up a couple of like Grendel back issues, and they were the Hunter Rose, from the Hunter Rose era. I thought it was great, of course. I'm a huge fan of pretty much anything that Matt Wagner does. I have not read The Shadow versus Grendel. I'm sure that it is awesome. If Matt Wagner did it, it's got to be awesome. I think he's absolutely one of my very, very favorites. Matt Wagner and the late and very much missed Darwin Cook are probably my two favorite writer-artist combos from like the last, 20, 25 years. Thank you to those of you who said Gesundheit or God bless you just now. I appreciate it. Becca Hawkins. Hi, Steve. I'm currently writing a horror novel with a happy ending. Probably counts as a spoiler, but whatever, as it's the only kind of horror I like anyway. Do you think happy endings mess with the art of horror films or books? Or do you think horror with a happy ending can be richer for the juxtaposition if done well? Oh, I think happy endings to a horror story can be great. One of my favorite horror movies from the last 20 years or so had a happy ending. 28 Days Later. The happy ending is in the context of a society devastated by a zombie apocalypse, but it's still a happy ending, and I think it works great. So yeah, happy ending on a horror story, there's nothing wrong with that if it's done right. Radical Bacon, do you like roller coasters or theme parks? Yes, I do. I enjoy them a lot when I'm actually there, but I don't enjoy them enough to make an effort to go out and visit them, apparently, because it's been, 10 years. Hey, that's it for the questions. It's time for the shout out of the week. And this week, in honor of Women's Equality Day, which is observed today in the United States, the shout out goes to the National Women's History Project. My 5 Things video this week was about women's equality in observance of Women's Equality Day today, and I mentioned during that video that Women's Equality Day is observed on this date every year in the US because it's the anniversary of the enactment of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. So it's a very important day in our history, but it's also a reminder that we still have a lot of work yet to do to realize true women's equality across all economic and racial and ethnic lines. It's still very much a fight that needs to be fought and needs to be won and waged with great vigor and great enthusiasm. So you can go to the website for the National Women's History Project, which is nwhp.org, and learn more about the history of women's rights, of the women's movement, and also learn about some things that you can do to participate, to raise awareness as we continue the long, inevitable, but still very necessary march toward women's equality in this country and, of course, around the world. And speaking of inevitable, it's time for me to remind you that you should be listening to the Lemme Listen podcasts, which is a family of podcasts under the benevolent dictatorship of my very good friend Jason Harding. There are 5 Lemme Listen podcasts that you can choose from, or you can just listen to them all, because they're all pretty good. There is, of course, Lemme Finish, the original, co-hosted by Jason and Finite Atticus. There is Cinema Shack, which is an awesome movie podcast, hosted by Mike and Alex, where they talk about all things movie related, and it's a lot of fun. There is the new podcast Cinetific, which is co-hosted by Professor Jason and Professor Aaron, where they look at the scientific claims of famous, well-known films and sort of check out whether or not they pass scientific muster. It's a really, really funny show and a really enjoyable show. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, the awesome improv comedy podcast that you should be listening to. And of course, my personal favorite, Late Seating, the movie review podcast that Jason and I host together, where we take a classic film, a film that has a reputation of either being great or terrible. We give it a fresh review, a fresh evaluation. Does it deserve its reputation for good or for bad? It's a fun show. It's one of my favorite things that I do. If you go to the website right now, you can hear our most recent episode, which is our review of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, or you can prepare for next week's new episode of Late Seating, because the movie we're reviewing next week is the blaxploitation classic, the original Shaft. So if you want to do some homework and get ready for the next episode of Late Seating, watch Shaft, because that's what the next episode is going to be about. You can listen to all the episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. And if you do, I don't know, you might be sorry. You might not like it. But I think you will. I think you'll like it, because I like it. And I assume that everyone's taste is my taste, or I at least assume that my taste is the standard by which other people's taste should be judged. Don't we all do that? I think we do. I do it, so I assume you do it. See, I just did it. Anyway, that's it for me, everybody. Please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until the next video, take care, everybody. Hey, Hey folks, as always, one more thing before I go. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.